suggestions later on. And so you're always in control. Now in Hollywood, it looks like sometimes that the person who is hypnotizing the subject is in control, but really it's not. It's something that's very akin to, perhaps you've seen Dancing with the Stars, where one person is leading and the other is following. It works very similar, where the hypnotist is just a facilitator, just helping that person get to that state where they're highly suggestible and they can take those suggestions in. And so you're always in control. That person who is facilitating is never in control of you. And so your participation is vital. If you're not listening to the suggestions and running them over in your own mind, it's not going to be effective. So you have to be in control. So that's another reason why it's a misnomer. And you're just very, very relaxed. That's it. That's why there's no degree. You don't go to college and get a degree in hypnosis. It's very, very simple. So then you get to that second state, and there's some others in there, but basically you go to what's called the induction. And there are a lot of different techniques, but it's a lot of times it's deep breathing. And there's a lot of further relaxation, but a lot of times you'll focus in on the eyes. There are some techniques where you will use the handshake to go into an induction, but a lot of people use the eyes, and they'll focus on that ocular nerve. I don't know why it works, I just know that it does work. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit later because it has to do with what's called the critical factor. It's kind of that place in your mind where it assigns a place of order in your brain. It's the judge. It acts like a gatekeeper. So what this eye fixation does is it kind of just taps this critical factor on the shoulder just so it can bypass it and go around, get into your subconscious mind. Because it's acting as a gatekeeper. That's why it's difficult for us a lot of times to see ourselves in a new way when we believed old thought patterns about ourselves, our old images. We still hold those images about ourselves from the past. And that kind of reminds me of an analogy of an elephant. A young elephant, a lot of times, if they're held in captivity, they're tied up to either a chain or a rope and they try to get away. But they learn that they can't get away. So even as an adult elephant, there could be just a thin strip of rope attached to their foot, their pachyderm foot. Even though they could break it away as an adult, they learned as a child they could not. And so those were those imprints, those brain pathways were built very early on. And that plays a critical factor in everybody's life, even today. So I just wanted to touch upon this now. I'll get into it further in a little bit. But once you've done the induction, you've done the eye work and the deep breathing and so on and so forth, you go deeper and deeper to different levels. And then you go into light hypnosis, and then deeper hypnosis. And then you can even get into such a deep state called somnambulism, which is basically loosely translated as a sleepwalker. So even though that person's up and moving around, they're still kind of out of it. Hence the word sleepwalker. But that's the state you want to get in, that deep state. So when Randy does a regression, that's really where they're at, that deep regressive, that deep stage. And then that's when the suggestions are placed in there at that deep state of mind. And then you would use anchors to anchor that person to whatever that goal is, however they're going to reach those goals. And what I do is I allow the person, since they are the expert in themselves, they know what their issues are. They know what the suggestion should be. So that's why it's critical in the interview stage to find out what those suggestions are going to do to work for them. In my own personal experience, when I was agoraphobic, I had a hypnotist. He was very good at getting me to that state where I was hypnotized, but the suggestions weren't correct. Whether I wasn't demonstrative enough with what I needed, but the suggestion was not correct. he made the suggestions that I needed to have confidence. But if there's no reference point to where, if you've never had confidence, you have no way of knowing what it is. You can't connect to it. And so later on, I learned through various synchronicities when I was being hypnotized, I listened to cassette tapes. And I learned to do my own just by listening to the cassette tapes. And I made my own on an analog old recorder, and made my own, listened to my own, and wore the tape out. But I was also reading a book. It was called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. And he was a plastic surgeon. And he realized that even after he would operate on his patients, he made them perfect. If they needed a new nose, new ears, new nip and tuck, whatever it was he did, he made them perfect physically. But what he realized was these people still had those scars on their psyche. They were still there because they still had those imprints. They still had that self-image of themselves as they did before. And so then that intrigued him, and then he started doing the work, and he did the research and found people could only move on if they lost those old images of themselves. And the way to do that, I'm sure he studied Buddha. He didn't say that he did, but there were so many great works that were out there that he studied. The Bible, forgiveness. You have to forgive others. You have to forgive yourself. So that was kind of my Bible back then, was that book. And a lot of the stuff that he talked about in changing your self-image and how you saw yourself. But not only that, but how you saw others. And when I was able to let go of all those negative emotions, I was able to grow. And just like you were going to let go of your business and just let it be, I had to let go of those images and all that anger, and even recently. So it was through those steps that I understood how you take those progressive steps now. So no matter what issue it is, you have to let go of the past. You have to let go of those old images of yourself. And so I know I kind of got off track with that a little bit, but I'm just saying that that's why suggestions are the key to hypnosis. I mean, anybody can get you down to those levels, but unless the suggestions are really honed in and perfect, it's not going to do anybody really that much good. So then you do what's called the emergence, where you, just as you descend into deeper levels, you talk the person back up into a more awakened state, and so on and so forth, and that's pretty self-explanatory. So here's what I really wanted to get to, and this is what nobody really talks about. So when it comes to weight loss, or why we have to look at why we gain the weight in the first place. So I'm going to talk about some things right here. Neuroplasticity, the suggestions, and that critical factor. Because that critical factor is the thing that's kind of controlling everything. Because that thing is just running amok. When you're not taking responsibility for your behavior, this critical factor takes over. This is that filter that allows everything to get in and out. And as I just explained before, hypnosis allows us to bypass this thing right here, to get into the subconscious, because he's the gatekeeper, he's the filter, and he's the judge. People are judging themselves based on how they are, negative self-image, procrastination, and excuses. Because when people, well, I better start back up here at neuroplasticity. Neuro, for neurons in the brain. Every time we have a thought, a pathway is made between those axons and dendrites in our brain. And thought after thought, you build up more pathways in the brain, and you start to develop a brain map. And so, you've heard that expression, practice makes perfect. We all know that. I could say that, and you can finish the sentence for me. We all know that. Well, why? Because every time you do something, you're building a pathway. And when you do it over and over, you build more efficient pathways, becoming more and more proficient each time. So when a baseball player, say when you're talking with Kyle, and he wants to play baseball, he wants to be a better hitter, he has to keep practicing. He has to envision that he's making the hit every time and tell his own brain that he has to make it, he's going to get a hit, he's going to get a hit. And he's building those pathways over and over. If he strikes out, all he's going to think about is striking out. I'm not a good hitter. Same thing, I'll make an analogy about, Joe Montana, when asked about why Jerry Rice was such a great receiver, it wasn't because about how many balls that he did catch. It's because he wasn't thinking about the balls that he did not catch. And so we all do that in different aspects of our life. And that's neuroplasticity. So when it's concerning weight, it's all about behaviors. So what if you become the expert in those things? What have people become expert in? They become experts in excuses, procrastination, sedentary patterns, and poor diet behaviors. So right now, people are stressed out. And if there was a room full of people coming for weight loss, they'd be saying, you're all stressed out right now. You're overworked. You're not exercising because you're already stressed out. You're too tired. Then you make an excuse, or you have every intention to do it. You just say you'll do it. You'll convince yourself you'll do it later, when later never comes. That's why you buy exercise equipment, treadmills or whatever it is, and now it's only collecting dust or rust. Or you've already set it out at the garage sale. Because you're listening to the old pathways. That's how you end up doing the things over and over, is because those pathways have already been established. And the brain just keeps going with the same pathways because it's the most efficient way. That's how we've been through evolution. That's how we evolve, is following those pathways. Whether they're positive or negative, that's just what happens. And the best way to get over those things is to build new pathways in the brain. You do that by being able to bypass that critical factor, so that you imagine yourself as a new self. You imagine that self as being successful, as being thin, and you feel it. It's not enough to just imagine it. You have to feel it. Connect with it in your heart so that it's real. And let go a lot of the stuff in the past that's held you back. Because if you can hold on to the past, you can't change these things unless the brain has something else to go on to. And so that's when you develop a new personal paradigm, a new model of yourself. And those new pathways are built during hypnosis. And a lot of us, in our weight loss goals, we see weight loss kind of as a mountain. That critical factor, a lot of times, what that critical factor sees is how far it has to go. And it quits. You quit on yourself, insofar as weight's concerned. You quit on your goal, and you just slough it off. Or you've looked back at the past, how you haven't succeeded in the past, so why try? So again, that's why it's important that you're able to build those new pathways, so you don't get exhausted there. You use the hypnosis to focus on where you're at, right there, present at every moment, and in control. Because you can't keep walking up a mountain. If you keep looking up, there might be a pitfall right there. You might slip and fall. So that's why you don't look too far ahead or look in the past. You can only be in the present. And that's what you need to do with your weight loss. You need to, number one, identify your behavior. How you eat, what you eat, drinking a lot of water. That's why I had that picture up there. But that's basically where you're at. Because you will succeed at your goals, no matter what it is. It might be weight loss today, but it's your business. You can focus on those things that if you're a salesperson, you need to have that smile on your face and that smile on your